Hi everyone, today let's talk about Powell's speech, then we'll get straight into the charts, and then we'll look at my results for the day and my positions going into tomorrow. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day that the markets are open, as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So Jerome Powell spoke today, and he didn't really say anything super important, but the markets generally liked what he had to say. He continued to talk about disinflation finally happening. They even mentioned during this talk that during his FOMC speech, he mentioned disinflation 11 different times, and that the disinflationary process has begun, and that they're seeing that in the goods sector right now. He did mention that he wants to see it more in the housing sector as well as services, but this initial stage of the goods sector coming down in price is a good thing, and it's the first steps in getting closer to that 2% overall inflation, which is the goal of the Fed. You can see markets really liked what he was saying early on, did drop off in the middle session here, and then bounced, overall up 1%. Powell did say that the Fed could hike rates more aggressively if they did get data that warranted it. I don't think that's new information. He's mentioned that he's about the data quite a bit, and that could really go both ways. If inflation comes in hotter, they could hike rates more, and if inflation comes in lower, potentially they could pause in this cycle. Does seem like they're very reactive to the data, so we do have to keep watching for that. But right now, the markets are pretty happy with what he said during this speech. He also addressed the very hot jobs report. He seems to think that it's a little bit structural. We had a decrease in immigration during COVID, and now since the job market has started to grow since the reopening, we just don't have the same kind of population inflows, creating that labor deficit. And it seems like now we're getting an increase of immigration, and those immigrants are starting to take those jobs, which could be a reason that we're seeing that hotter jobs report that we got on the non-farm payrolls last week. Overall, he didn't view that as a big issue, and he did note that financial conditions did tighten after that report, which is what the Fed wants right now. Moving over to the charts, starting with the S&Ps on the hour and the 4 hour, you can see it was a very choppy session, rallied pretty aggressively from support all the way up to 415 early in the session, gave all of that back through a wick through the lows and then continued higher. You can see that support still continuing to hold from the previous day and then once again here today. So tested support, rallied through the rest of the session, and you can see big 4 hour candle positive on the day. Does look a little weak, maybe a little extended going into the end of day here. You can see we're selling off after hours. Did touch that 416 level, which was resistance here going back to Friday of last week. So that'll be an interesting level to watch. If we do sell off from there, maybe come back in and test 411, 412, maybe in that zone, and then get the continuation. Certainly a possibility, certainly would coincide with the 9 and the 21 EMAs on the 4 hour chart. You can see momentum on the 4 hour stepping into the positive direction, momentum on the hourly stepping into the positive direction. Basically, everything here is bullish going into tomorrow. And even if we are going to ultimately go down from this 418 level, you would expect that bull topping process to take place. So come in, maybe get up to 420, test that level and get rejection. And then you're going to be looking to take out this middle level at 408.75. Come through this support line, and then you would be looking to come back down into this 395 level. So definitely something to watch for. Definitely still bullish going into tomorrow with a couple of points of upside potential. Then we'll be looking at that 418 level for interactions and possible rejection. Moving over to Max Payne, I do want to talk about it just for a moment here. You can see there's still a lot of puts in the system, 61,000 contracts at 405, 45,000 contracts here at 410. So a lot of bearishness still in the markets. I wouldn't expect to get below 405 at the end of the week. Certainly could float around that 410 level. If we do go any higher than that, there's 36,000 calls at 412 and then 41,000 at 415. I would say 415 would probably be the upper limit for the close. Does seem like we're going to test resistance at 418 and then potentially get rejection. But I do want to highlight how many more puts there are here still than the calls. Still many more overall, meaning that you would expect the markets to float in the bullish direction. Max Payne is at 407. That's where Wall Street makes the most money, at a 407 close. Markets don't always go to 407, but it could. Looking at open interest just for a moment, there are quite a few 410 calls. These people potentially going to make some money, but you could certainly expect it to come a little bit below 410, float into this 408, 409 level, where there's not a lot of puts that are going to make money and then not a lot of calls that are going to make money either. And that's generally what you should expect towards the end of the week. Remember, this is the Friday expiration, not tomorrow's. Could certainly go up and then come back down, which does fit with my thesis. Looking at the NASDAQ on all of the shorter time frames, I just want to highlight this for a moment here. This is the 3, the 5, the 15, and the hour. This is generally what I trade off of. But I want to highlight here that every single one of these is still in a bullish trend. We're above the 200 SMA on the 15. We have almost all the EMAs in order on the hourly chart. You can see bullish trend here on the 5 and the 3. We are selling off a little bit after hours, which is certainly interesting. Same as what we saw on the SPY. Could potentially come back down into this 307 level, which would correlate with a lot of EMAs. Like I said, everything's still bullish here. Moving over to the 4-hour and the daily charts for that longer term perspective, you can see the 4-hour momentum ticking to the upside. Did get a step down here after hours with the RSI. Are at that upper level of resistance. We got below it here, came back up. We're retesting now. We could come back into this longer term trend line. You can see going back to this bigger channel that we've been watching. Test that support and then get the continuation, which would allow this shorter term channel to get above the longer term. Certainly a possibility here, would be interesting, but that's something that I'm watching. I am marginally bearish despite all of the bullish price action just because we're slightly overextended here. I do think we're going to come in and retest some of these levels down at 306, 307 in that zone, but I would expect to find support into the rest of the day and that this is overall going to continue in the bullish direction just based on this 4-hour momentum. We did get a step down on daily momentum, but it was extremely minor, 2.2 to 2.22. And then we did get a step up on RSI here. So overall, bullish trend still intact. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow on the 4-hour charts, you can see the Russell testing resistance. Once again, we did come through it, came back testing that resistance. This is the longer term, bigger channel trend line. So a powerful trend line, definitely something we were watching. If we do find rejection here and we come back down and test 192, certainly a possibility. I did make a little bit of money on this rally here today. I sold a put early in the session. Did try to roll that up just for a moment, but then I closed it because it does look like we're going to move down from this resistance at least a little bit. Maybe we find support at 194 like we did here before. Certainly a possibility, but it seems like the bigger support is going to be down here at 192. And if we do push through that, then like I said before, I am looking at the 188, 189 level for longer term support. Moving over to the Dow, big green candle here today. We got all the way above the 341.66 level. That's not an all-time high, but it did take out a lot of these wicks that we had through this area. If we do come back down into the 340, 340.50 level, and then push through all of these wicks, that would be very bullish for markets. And it would be interesting to see the Dow moving higher here if the rest of the markets sell off a little bit like I've been talking about. Moving over to Apple and Tesla, not a lot to say here. Similar thesis on Apple, came up, tested some of those previous highs, still running into resistance in this zone, right at this 154 to 156 area. Still waiting to see if we get a true rejection from there. Has not happened yet, so overall we're still bullish until we get a bigger engulfing candle to the downside, something more bearish. Moving over to Tesla, still really struggling with that 200 level. Just can't seem to get above it. Starting to get steps down here on the daily momentum. Not significant steps, but increasing in speed here. RSI still ticking slightly higher. It was still a green day, just a little bit at the close, but you can see momentum is definitely waning in my opinion. Moving over to consumer discretionary and consumer staples. This is not what you want to see if you are bearish on the market. So consumer staples gapping down, trying to fill the gap. Did just barely fill the gap and then closed flat on the day. Consumer discretionary, however, did not gap down, did come in, test the 21 EMA on the 4-hour, and then almost engulfed the entire previous candle, indicating potential bullishness. That's definitely interesting to see, not what we saw on the other charts here. 21 EMA holding up strong, acting as support here. That's what you want to see if this is going to go higher. Whereas consumer discretionary is getting pushed down here by the 55 EMA on the 4-hour now. That is where you're going to be looking for resistance, in my opinion. Come up into this zone. And then as that 55 EMA continue to trend down, you would expect price action to be moving in that direction also. It is also worth noting that we have all the EMAs in order here now. So you have the 9, 21, 55, and 144. This is turning into a true bearish trend. And then we can start looking at that longer term price goal. Probably looking at support down around the 70-20 level. That's a longer term trend line that we've been watching. I would expect it to come down into that level if this trend is going to continue the way that it is right now. Moving over to transports. Transports did not rally as much as the markets here today. Still a green day. Did rally with the markets, but not as much. Did lag a little bit compared to the previous rally that it had. Be interesting to see if this turns into a little bit of divergence. Markets continue to go higher. Transports start to stall out in this area. That would be interesting, potentially indicating that we're going to get that bigger downturn. But right now, everything is still moving in the right direction and still bullish. Moving over to semis just for a moment. This is starting to look like a double topping pattern potentially. We do come in, test that previous resistance at 254.80, and we get rejection and we turn down, and then we break this neckline at 144.38. Maybe 133.85 in that area. If that does break down, then we're going to be looking at 226. If we zoom out here and we do get above the previous high, then you'd be looking for the gap fill at 258. And maybe we go even a little bit higher up to that 262, 263 area. But right now, looking for that next level to break or not. If we do get that rejection, you would want it to happen over the next day or two. And then once again, like I said, looking for that neckline to break and looking for that 226 price target if we do get through that neckline. Moving over to yields, pretty much flat on the day, got rejection. Still can't get above that 450 level here on the 2-year. So we're not breaking out yet. Definitely looking to see what happens here. If we do get another rejection at that 4.5 level and we move down, that would be bullish for stocks. It does look like momentum is moving to the downside here. RSI is ticking down as well. We are below the EMA on RSI, so it looks like the 2-year might be rolling over at least a little bit. Maybe we come down and fill this gap down to 4.29 and then we get the move higher. Something like that. Certainly possible. However, moving over to the 10-year is breaking out. So we did test that resistance line, got rejection, tested it again, got rejection, and now we're through it. And that's interesting. So if we do start to move higher here, not a lot of resistance to the upside, maybe looking at 3 3/4 as the next level of resistance. That would be the next major level. But it's interesting to see that the yield curve is actually moving in the right direction. We have the 10-year yield going higher and the 2-year yield moving basically sideways. That is what you want to see if we are going to move in the right direction. You can see momentum here on the 4-hour for the 10-year also stepping higher. So like I said, yield curve moving in the right direction, and markets were bullish on this development. Moving over to the dollar on the 4-hour and the daily chart here, you can see we got rejection at the 55 EMA like we talked about. We tested that level, got rejected. Do have a little bit of a double topping formation here now. We are slightly below that neckline, so you would expect this to come back down and at least test support, potentially at the 200-day moving average, maybe 102.98, somewhere in that zone. We kind of already tested that with this wick and then did find some support. But if this does continue down here tomorrow, that would potentially be bullish for stocks. And that's definitely something to watch. Like I said, I'm slightly bearish going into the open. But if we do see the dollar starting to fall off here and potentially come all the way back down to 102.30 where the 9 EMA is, which is crossing the 21 EMA on the daily chart right now, that would definitely be interesting and give us a little bit more bullish price action going into tomorrow. Moving over to high yields on the 4-hour and the daily chart, basically came up, filled the gap, got a little bit of rejection, found support at the 55 EMA on the 4-hour chart, which was at that 93 level that we continue to talk about. So at this point, you would expect it to move higher. It certainly could happen. We did fill the gap, though, giving you more potential to roll over. So we're hitting gap resistance, finding support at the 55 EMA. Obviously, one of these two things is going to happen. Right now, it looks a little bit more bullish, in my opinion, just because we have momentum on the 4-hour stepping down here today. RSI did tick up, although momentum on the daily chart did step down, even the bullish price action. So that's pretty interesting. Definitely conflicting signals here, something to watch going into tomorrow. Moving over to TLT, not a lot to say here. We basically retested the 22 on the hourly chart and moved lower. This is a true downtrend now. We've had multiple tests of the EMAs and this is continuing down. We are right at the 55-day moving average where we talked about potentially finding some support. Certainly possible. But if we do get below that level on the daily chart, this is starting to look pretty bearish. We're going to get a cross of the 21 and the 9 EMAs, it looks like, generally indicating that we're in that bearish trend. Momentum on the daily chart stepping down in a big way. Momentum on the hourly chart also stepping down. Got to oversold conditions early in the session just for a moment. Then we did get that bounce, and now we're continuing down. You could certainly argue that there's a little bit of divergence here on the hour. You have lower price action with a stronger RSI reading. So that's interesting. It's definitely something to watch for going into tomorrow. But as the 10-year yield continues to go higher, you should expect TLT to go lower. Moving over to the VIX, once again, cannot get above that resistance level. Threw a couple of wicks through it, could not close above it, closed right at that level. Candle rolled over and we sold off. Pretty good indicator that we're going to stay below this level here. We also did fill this gap, indicating we could find a little bit of bullish momentum into tomorrow on the VIX, which would fit with my thesis of a little bit of bearishness early in the session. But this is definitely something to watch. This is giving you a perfect indicator that we had bottomed and that we were going to rally through the session, and that is what ended up happening. Moving over to my accounts, you can see here I made a little bit of money, not as much as the markets overall. You can see the NASDAQ was up over $6 today, which was pretty aggressive. Finished the day at 309.88, down almost 80 cents here after hours, which is interesting. I guess I did pick up an IWM here at 194. That was probably a bad position. It is 194 and it is 50 cents, so that's about $2 below the current price. So about a 1% move tomorrow is where I'm buying the stock. If I do get assigned on this position, we are down after hours here already quite a bit. So down to 195.15. Certainly looks like we're going to open lower tomorrow. I don't know if that was a good position, but we'll take a look at it tomorrow. Either way, I would get to buy the IWM 1% lower than it traded at today. And then if I do get assigned there, I can always sell calls to get out of that position if I need to. I did roll my call from today into tomorrow just because the market was rallying so aggressively. You can see I got a 297 credit there. And I'm already super negative on those calls, so I have a ton of protection to the downside if the market does want to roll over. If we continue to stay high or go sideways, I might roll these calls or open up some new covered calls tomorrow. We'll see what it looks like. Like I said, somewhat bearish into the open. Expect to find a little bit of support. If we don't get that support, I'll definitely close my positions and start to look for some bearish entries. But right now, everything is bullish like I talked about. Let me know down in the comment section if there's any charts you would like me to go over, and definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video. Make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. I make these videos every single day the markets are open, as well as Sundays. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.